Brian Burke, Sportsnet hockey analyst, joining us here on Tim and Sid. Burkey, I can only imagine how tricky it is for GM in this moment to both try and defend his players from what he feels are incorrect reporting or rumors out there and still not be in a position where they can actually clarify anything, because that has been agreed to between both the players and the league. This is a tricky spot.
Well, I think it was important. Certainly, I would have dispelled any rumors. That the rumor is apparently that there's a conditioning issue, and that's why certain guys were in a different group. And I've asked point blank and been told it's not true. That doesn't mean that teams are going to be honest about everything, but we never had any problems with Johnny's conditioning or work ethic or any of that stuff. Never once. He's very professional. Maybe had a little fun when he was a rookie, but a lot of rookies do that.
The unfit to play designation that we have to basically lump anyone who can't participate into the same bucket so that people aren't speculating in terms of who may or may not have tested positive for COVID-19. Obviously, the Players Association was given some say in the league in negotiations. But do you know if the actual executives, the GMs, were counseled on it, because they're really the ones who have to answer those types of questions?
Yeah, they had a conference call, and the league was emphatic about it. I mean, there's a federal law in the U.S. that affects this. What you can disclose about an employee's health is rigidly controlled in the U.S. So part of this is required by law. You're not allowed to give certain detail out. So the policy makes sense to me. The players apparently felt very strongly about it, that they did not want their health discussed. It makes sense to me. It's aggravating. People in the media think they're entitled to full disclosure on injuries and stuff. I've never felt that way. And I will tell you, from having played, if you knew a guy had a bad left shoulder, you would talk about it on the bench. You would say, hey, we hear Burke's got a bad shoulder. You get a piece of him if you get a chance. They wouldn't target him or bend the rules or cheat or anything. But if they're going to finish the check and they know a guy might have a bad upper body or a sore shoulder or something, they're going to finish it. They're going to take that opportunity. And guys would openly talk about it on the bench. This guy's favoring his left leg. Let's get a lick on him if you can. So the less said about injuries, the better from my perspective. I know the media has a different view. The only thing the league has done that I agree with, and I think this will be really important as we get more involved with wagering on pro sports, is that if a player is not going to return to play, teams are obligated to make that known.
Brian Burke here on Tim and Sid. There's a lot going on around the league, obviously, right now. Burkey, the news out of Boston today that David Pastrnak has been listed unfit to play, and Bruce Cassidy can't really give any more information above that. Let's just focus on Pastrnak here. Has he not developed into, dare I say, one of the best players in the world? Like, is he going to be missed to that extent?
Well, it's 1 day unfit to play. The designation it would cover if he had a hip pointer the same. They're not allowed to disclose the injury. So it doesn't mean he tested positive or anything. And yes, he has developed into an elite player. And obviously, if he's not available in these playoffs, that would be a big blow to their team. But 1 day on the unfit to play list, that I'm not panicking yet.
Let's speak directly to our audience and the Canadian teams that are vying for the Stanley Cup. Have you changed your calculation in terms of who you think the team best built to hoist the cup was pre-pandemic as to who you now think that might be?
Well, I've been going over this ever since the playoff pairings were announced, trying to figure out who's going to do what. And I still come back to, I said this earlier on the radio, in a different market, the 4 teams that got buys, to me, are the teams that are probably going to be left standing at the end of this in each conference. So to me, I don't see any weaknesses on the bye teams. You look at Tampa Bay, they had a great team. They went out and got dramatically better at the deadline. Boston, they were running away with the regular season title, and why would I expect them to not be able to carry that through? Now it comes down to goaltending, special teams, and injuries, but I look at the 4 bye teams in the West, and they're the 4 best teams in the West. I look at the 4 bye teams in the East. They're the 4 best teams in the East.
Brian Burke here on Tim and Sid. Sheldon Keefe's made it pretty obvious here, Burkey, that he believes, considering how many Leafs were present for Phase 2, how much of the team did manage to gather and work out a little bit in their separate groups. he thinks they're ahead of the game. He thinks they are a bit more prepared than other teams. How much stock do you put in that?
Well, I think there's an advantage to that. If the guys were together, but they were working out in small groups, they couldn't do, like big drills and practice and stuff like that. But being around each other a little bit, that's always a good thing for a team. But I think you've got teams too where they're so accustomed to winning and have such a good culture that you could throw those guys together right before camp and have the same effect. So I think it's a positive. I don't think Sheldon's making that up, but I'm not sure that's a defining factor for me in looking at what their odds are. The one thing for Leaf fans that I take as very encouraging is when they played poorly in this past year, they usually had a bounce back game where they paid attention to detail, where they worked hard, where they played a sound defensive game. So they've demonstrated they can and have played playoff caliber hockey. The question is, will they do it, and can they do it against a very determined team that's finally healthy and is going to throw four lines at you and roll four and forecheck aggressively? And the answer is yes, they can do it. And I talked to 5 GMs and assistant GMs before I went on the radio the other day, and they all said the same thing. Toronto should win this series. And the but was Tortorella. And you saw what they did last year, dismantling a Tampa Bay team in the first round with sheer will. So this is will versus skill. And what Toronto's going to have to do to win this series is match Columbus's intensity and pay attention to detail. They have to play playoff hockey, no big mistakes. And I think the forechecking game of Columbus will expose the fact that their D isn't great.
I've heard that team, Toronto, being talked about in a bubble scenario, and that being potentially a pro and potentially a con. You've led a team in that very market in Toronto, and them not having the entire building at home get tense as soon as they get behind in the first round, I suppose could help them. But you're talking about intensity and playing in a sterile environment. It may be tough to get some intensity. Are they uniquely in a better or worse situation now that they're in a bubble in Toronto?
I've heard that theory, and I think there's something to it. There's no question, because their lack of playoff success, and people tend to they look out for the boulder falling from the sky when if it's 3-1, and now it's 3-2, they're all waiting for the third goal to be scored, and the game's tied all of a sudden. So that might be a benefit. I think this is all foreign and new territory for all these teams, playing in front of no fans, dressing in a strange dressing room. It's all different. And the team that buys in the quickest and says, okay, we're playing without fans. We've done it before. We all grew up playing on rinks where there weren't any fans outside. It was too cold. And they've played in small market. They played in the American League in front of small crowds. They've played in Florida in front of small crowds. So to me, the teams that adapt to this new landscape quickly are going to have the most success. I think we're going to see some great hockey out of this. I don't think the players they'll notice it at first, but I never paid attention to the crowd when I played. People were yelling at you and you never hear any of that. You're focused on the game. So to me, it's about, okay, it's a new look. It's different. The team that shrugs it off first is going to have the best success.
Brian Burke here on Tim and Sid. Burkey, Nick Robertson at 18 years of age. The talk surrounding this kid, and to no one's surprise, considering the market he's in, has been immense. And he doesn't turn 19 till September. How realistic is his chances of making this squad? Because there's still a part of me that thinks, look, it's a tremendous experience for him, but I don't think Sheldon and Kyle would throw him into a fire like that.
I don't think they will to start. He's a really good young player. He's going to be a good pro. But what he brings to the lineup is small, soft skill. He's a soft skill guy. They got tons of soft skill. That's not what they need to prevail in this playoff series. So I would say they would start without him. And then if they're sputtering offensively, they might put him in. He's a gifted player. But he's not – if I'm looking at the lineup and the coach says to me, what about Robertson? I'd say, what are you, nuts? Play the guys that know how to do this and have done it for a while. And then if we get banged up or we're sputtering offensively, someone's struggling, we'll give them a shot. But start with the guys that you brung to the dance.
So you've been able to do a lot of things in the game. Player, executive, media member, now author. You got a book coming out on October 13th, Burkes Law, A Life in Hockey, some truculence, some barn fights, some family, and lots of hockey stories. The cover, amazing, by the way. Your hair has never looked better. Amazing part. You still couldn't smile for the cover of your own book, of course. But you, I'm sure, have been offered many book opportunities. Why this one and why now, teaming up with the incomparable Stephen Brunt?
Well, Stephen Brunn approached me about doing a book after we won the Cup in Anaheim, and I didn't think I had a full enough resume at that point. That was, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, whatever it is. And I said no. But then my last year in Calgary, my workload kind of fell off the last few months there. I wasn't as involved in the decision making as I had been, and I had some time. So first I did an outline. And then I said, well, I'll start filling in some stories. I ended up with 150 pages, single spaced, of my life in hockey. And so I started writing the book, and then I hired Stephen, and he's a much better writer than I am. And he's a good guy, too. I really enjoyed working with him on this. But I think there's some really interesting stories in there. I was an agent. I represented players for 6 years when I practiced law in Boston, and then assistant GM for Pat Quinn in Vancouver for 5. Then to Hartford as rookie GM for a year, and then to the league office, and then to from there to back to Vancouver as GM, then Anaheim, then Toronto, then Calgary. So 32 years, not counting the agent side of things, 38 years if you count the agent side of things. And there's some good stories in there, like representing Brett Hull when he did his first contract, representing Pete Peters, representing Joel Otto, and then working for the incomparable Pat Quinn and learning how to run a team and how to build a team, and then moving on and get your first shot, and then working at the league. So there's a lot of good stories just based on my tenure and the different roles I've had. But also there's some really important moments in the game that I was directly involved in. The McSorley-Brashear incident, the Bertuzzi-Moore incident, the Weidman incident, running into a linesman. So there's some good stories that I'm telling right from the inside, and I think people will enjoy the book. I think it's going to be an interesting read, and I think people will like it.
Was there a story, Burkey, that Stephen Brunt pressed you on that you did not want to tell?
No. There's a lot of stories that I could tell that aren't in the book, but there's some that, I'm pretty factual about things that happen, and I think there's some things in there that people will enjoy reading. But no, I haven't gone out of my way to skewer anybody. But I think, there are some stories that didn't make it into the book that Stephen didn't think were interesting enough, and it's got me thinking about a second book.
Oh, that's a no-brainer. Burkey, this is the great thing is you've done a book. The bad thing is you've done a book, because this thing's going to be fantastic. Again, on bookshelves, October 13th, pre-order now. This thing's going to sell like hotcakes. And now it's just, you're going to have people knocking down your door to do more books. How many more books do you think you have in you?
Well, I don't know. I'm not. I'm working pretty hard these days trying to prepare for the playoffs. So I'm just writing down thoughts of stories that didn't make it into the book because either I didn't tell Stephen about them. You do a 32-year career plus the 6 practicing law, and you fill up the book pretty quickly, and that means you leave a lot of stuff out that I would find interesting, and I think hockey fans would. So maybe a second book. We'll see. I'm not committed to that yet.
Finally, Burkey, you mentioned getting ready for the play-in rounds to come. What have you been told of your schedule? Like, are you going to be chained to that desk? Nothing, eh? Nothing yet?
No, they're trying to, and I'm not upset about that. The bosses are trying to figure this out. I think they just finally got the broadcast schedule yesterday or today. So I think we had a call today, and they said we'll have the schedules done as quickly as we can. I have no idea how much or how little I'll be working. I hope it's a lot, but I'm getting ready for it as if I have to do every game. So we'll see. I'm really excited. I think the league's done a really good job to get us to this point. The next 12 or 13 days are going to be critical, that the players have to stay disciplined and get to the bubble healthy. But I think once they get to the bubble, I think the league can keep them safe. And I think we'll see some great hockey.
Brian Burke, again, the book coming out, Burkes Law, A Life in Hockey, October 13th. It's available on bookshelves. You can pre-order now. Congratulations on it, Burkey, and appreciate you coming on again, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for the kind words.